It was a dark and stormy night. The kind of night that made your skin crawl and your blood run cold. Jaya had just moved into an old, creaky house on the outskirts of town. She had heard the rumors about the house being haunted, but she didn't believe in such things. Little did she know, she was about to experience a horror unlike anything she could have imagined. As she settled into her new home, strange things started happening. Doors would slam shut on their own, the floorboards would creak as if someone was walking on them, and she could hear whispers in the dead of night. At first, she brushed it off as the house settling. But as the days went by, the strange occurrences only got worse. One night, as she lay in bed, she heard a blood-curdling scream coming from the basement. She mustered up the courage to investigate, but when she got down there was nothing but an eerie silence. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was lurking in the shadows, watching her every move. The following day, Jaya decided to do some research on the house. She discovered that a family had lived there years ago, but they had mysteriously disappeared without a trace. The local townspeople claimed that the house was cursed and anyone who lived there would meet a terrible fate. As the days turned into weeks, Jaya's sanity started to slip. She couldn't sleep, she was constantly on edge, and she felt like she was being watched at every moment. She tried to leave the house, but every time she attempted to, she would be overcome with a sense of dread and find herself unable to go through with it. One night, as she lay in bed, she felt a cold hand creep across her neck. She tried to scream, but no sound would come out. She was paralyzed with fear as she felt the presence of something malevolent in the room with her. In a panic, she reached for the bedside lamp and switched it on, only to find herself alone in the room. Jaya knew that she had to get to the bottom of what was happening in the house. She contacted a paranormal investigator who agreed to help her uncover the truth. As they delved into the history of the house, they unearthed a dark secret that had been buried for decades. It turned out that the former owners of the house had dabbled in the occult, performing dark rituals in the basement. They had summoned something evil into the house, and it had never left. It was the source of all the strange occurrences that Jaya had been experiencing. Determined to rid the house of the demonic presence, the investigator and Jaya performed a cleansing ritual. But as they chanted the ancient words and burned sage, the house seemed to come alive with a malevolent energy. Objects flew across the room, the walls shook, and the temperature dropped to freezing. Just when it seemed like all hope was lost, the house fell silent. The investigator turned to Jaya with a grave expression and told her that they had angered the entity, and it was more powerful than they had anticipated. As they made their way out of the house, Jaya could feel the presence of the demon following them. She knew that it was only a matter of time before it would strike again. And strike it did. In the dead of night, Jaya awoke to find the investigator standing over her bed, his eyes empty and void of any humanity. He lunged at her with inhuman strength, his hands closing around her throat. She fought for her life, struggling to break free from his grasp. Just when she thought she couldn't hold on any longer, the first light of dawn broke through the window. The investigator's grip loosened, and he stumbled back, a look of confusion crossing his face. It was as if he had been possessed by the entity, but the rising sun had forced it to release its hold on him. In the chaotic aftermath, Jaya fled the house, vowing never to return. She knew that she had narrowly escaped with her life, but she also knew that the demon was still out there, waiting for its next victim. To this day, the house stands empty and abandoned, a dark and foreboding monument to the horrors that lurk within its walls. And Jaya will never forget the terror she endured in the haunted house on the outskirts of town. Months passed, but the events that took place in the haunted house haunted Jaya every single day. She couldn't shake the feeling that the demon was still there, lingering in the shadows, watching her every move. She had moved to a new town, found a new job, and tried to start over, but the trauma of what had happened followed her like a dark cloud. No matter where she went, she couldn't escape the feeling of unease that had settled in her bones. She would wake up in the middle of the night, drenched in cold sweat, feeling as though the demon's eyes were boring into her. She had trouble trusting anyone, always wondering if they were under the influence of the malevolent entity. Her friends and family tried to help her, but she knew that only she could rid herself of the darkness that had taken hold of her life. She researched everything she could about demonic entities, haunted houses, and exorcisms, determined to find a way to banish the demon once and for all. One day, she came across an ancient book that spoke of a powerful ritual that could expel it even the most malevolent of spirits. The ritual involved traveling to a remote, desolate place and performing a series of ancient chants and offerings to appease the malevolent entity. Jaya knew that she had to do it, even if it meant facing the demon head-on. Armed with the knowledge she had gained, Jaya set out on a journey to find the remote location described in the ancient book. She traveled for days, through barren landscapes and treacherous terrain, until she finally arrived at the place the book had mentioned. It was a desolate, wind-swept plateau, with jagged rocks and twisted trees as far as the eye could see. As the sun began to set, Jaya set up her makeshift altar and began the ancient chants and rituals. The air grew cold and the wind howled around her, carrying with it a sense of foreboding. But Jaya persevered, determined to banish the demon that had haunted her for so long. As she neared the end of the ritual, the ground began to tremble, and dark clouds gathered overhead. The wind picked up, swirling around her in a frenzy, and she could feel the demon's presence closing in on her. But she refused to give in to fear, focusing all her energy on completing the ritual. Suddenly, a violent crack split the air, and a blinding light illuminated the plateau. Jaya shielded her eyes, and when she looked up, she saw the demon standing before her, its eyes burning with an otherworldly fire. Its form was twisted and grotesque, and its very presence seemed to suck the life out of the world around it. Jaya stood her ground, her voice unwavering as she recited the final chant, calling upon the forces of light to banish the demon from this plane of existence. The demon let out a deafening roar and lunged at her, but at the last moment, the ground beneath it cracked open, and a blinding light burst forth, swallowing the demon whole. As the light faded, Jaya found herself standing alone on the plateau, the air eerily calm and still. She knew that the demon was gone, banished back to the depths of the nether world where it belonged. She had conquered her fear, faced the darkness,